Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Sitting in for Pinky Webb, I'm Mai Rodriguez. Today on the program, the government will grant financial assistance to workers on Labor Day as President Bongbong Marcos makes no mention of a wage hike in his May 1st message. And a proposal for a temporary work break as workers face the impact of extreme heat. Senator Koko Pimentel joins us live. And later, nations expressed support to the Philippines after a Chinese ship conducted dangerous maneuvers in the West Philippine Sea. Beijing claims the near collision was caused by the Philippine patrol vessel's, quote, premeditated and provocative action. Philippine Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore J. Tariela tells us more in the program. President Bongbong Marcos makes no mention of the appeals to increase the salary of workers on Labor Day. The government is instead granting financial and livelihood assistance to qualified workers nationwide. And what should the government do to protect workers amid the extreme heat experienced in the country? Let's go straight to the source of the story, Senate Minority Leader Koko Pimentel. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Mai. Magandang umaga, mayong buntag na imbag na bigat.
Okay, let's talk about your proposal for work break in a bit. But first, let's talk about petitions for a wage hike since today is Labor Day. But the Labor Department is clear that there will be no major wage announcement. And instead, they said that they will offer ayuda or livelihood programs in different job fairs happening in the country. Your thoughts on this, Senator? Do you think this is enough for workers' needs?
Well, yung mga job fairs and then of course ayuda are already regular. The ayuda is a regular feature of every administration. The job fairs are regular features of Labor Day celebrations. So I think we need to be more imaginative now to answer the needs of our employees and the labor sector, given the new reality, that life is very difficult nowadays. So siguro, since the government is not ready to announce a legislated wage hike, siguro the best announcement is that they should support, the government will support the many proposals for legislated wage hikes.
Senator, 8 wage hike petitions are filed in different regions in the country and 58 bills filed at the lower house, while 21 bills at the Senate on a wage hike. So what's the big challenge or hurdle in turning this to legislation?
Well, we need to compute, find out what would be a decent minimum wage for a family of 5. And then we have to balance now the interests of the micro and small enterprises, which may not be able to afford this mandatory wage hike. So, kailangan i-hearing na po ng maayos yan at yung mga resource persons na maimbita namin ay talagang marurunong sa kanilang mga areas of expertise or areas of responsibility. Pero sa tingin ko, kailangan na we have right now a decentralized system where we have regional wage boards. But then, even if you look at the region which has the highest daily wage already, if you look at that amount, it's you can still question whether that amount is sufficient for a daily wage earner with a family of total members of 5, even in the other regions where cost of living is supposed to be cheaper. So it's really time to review the amounts, and then a legislated minimum wage can live side by side with our decentralized system. So if Congress legislates a new minimum wage, that will be the new minimum all over the country, and then the regional boards may add to the minimum wage, to the legislated minimum wage, depending on the situation in their regions.
It's good, Senator, that you mentioned a decent wage for a family, because a recent study by Ibon Foundation revealed that a decent family living wage in Metro Manila alone is 1,161 pesos. But the minimum wage in the NCR is at 570 pesos. So how should the government address this huge disparity? Should the decision also on a wage hike, you mentioned, sabi mo, centralized nga?
And right now, it's decentralized. We have regional wage boards. So, iba-ibang region, iba-iba ang minimum wage. As if naman, hindi rin mahirap ang buhay doon sa mga regions outside of Metro Manila. Mahirap din po ang buhay doon. Ang fuel nga, mas mahal pa nga doon. And maybe even electricity costs. So, we really have to research, find out, and then find out the situation on the ground, yung nararamdaman talaga ng ating mga kababayan, lalo na yung mga earning the minimum wage or below the minimum wage. So yung mga 1,100, I think the assumption there is that's a family of 5, and then I hope yung 3 children would be already can be already left behind in the house, so that there will be the 2 parents are both working, so they can survive. But we need to increase the minimum wage.
Senator, any legislation or proposed bill in mind to address wage concerns?
Yes, I think our Senate President Mig Subiri, proposed a 150 peso across the board increase. So ang kanyang proposal is whatever is the minimum wage set by the wage board, you add 150 pesos. So I think we can start with studying that proposal, and then we can also study the proposal of looking at the lowest amount in the salary standardization scheme of the government, and then derive from that the daily wage, the minimum daily wage of a worker. Kasi point of view na ng gobyerno yun eh. That is what the government pays its lowest salaried employee.
Yes, Senator, still on workers, let's talk about the extreme heat being felt all over the country. Tell us more about your proposal for a work break.
Well, ito na nga, sobrang init, no? And then I encountered this in the United Arab Emirates. In the United Arab Emirates, UAE, since they can predict their seasons, during the summer, they really reach high temperatures. Doon, more or less permanent na, may program na sila doon that during the summer months, a certain period of the day in the summer months, the employers must give a mandatory break to their workers, especially those exposed to the sun or working under the heat of the sun, working outdoors, working without any shade. So dun at the peak hours, yung pinakamainit na parte ng araw, ay mandatory yung break nila. So in our case here, we can borrow the idea, we can borrow the concept, but then we can make it contingent or parang emergency. It's an emergency measure na if ever, pwede nga tayong maging mas flexible. If as a labor standard, labor policy, if ever the temperature reading hits a critical level in a certain place, critical way, ano na yan, determine na ng DOLE yan, maybe 40 degrees Celsius and above, no? A work stoppage should be declared so that the worker, the employee who works outdoors under the heat of the sun without any shade will be given relief 1 or 2 hours away from the sun under the shade, given water, magpalamig muna. And that should be counted already as hours worked. Hindi naman niya kasalanan yun. Hindi rin naman kasalanan ng employer, but this is the way that we should be understanding of each other. We should be generous enough to be concerned about the welfare of our fellow man.
Ito po yung especially para sa mga construction workers at yung mga nasa daan, mga traffic enforcers natin.
Correct.
Kesa naman magka-heat stroke pa sila, po?
Saka,
And our farmers.
yung mga, kahit yung mga field workers siguro na ini-employ, na meron silang employer. So, ganun po yun. At saka, our scientists, siguro DOST and the Department of Health together with the Department of Labor will determine that critical temperature. What is the critical temperature? Sa akin kasi 38 degrees Celsius ang pagkakalam ko niyan. That's already a fever eh. So siguro pagka mga 40 degrees Celsius, medyo critical na po yan.
Well, what do you say about a hazard pay po during extreme heat?
Ang problem dyan, you are just monetizing the danger eh. So ang gusto nang sabihin is tuloy kayo magtrabaho under extreme heat. Bigyan na lang kayo ng extra pay. I do not think that is the idea. The idea is to really maintain and safeguard the health of our workers, of our fellow man, our kababayan, our countrymen, our fellow Filipinos. So this must be a mandatory break from exposure to the heat, to the extreme heat. But of course, there will be exceptions. Kunyari, emergency work. Ganun po talaga. If it's an emergency work, tuloy ang emergency work, then just give them this extra pay or hazard pay. But as a general rule, hindi po ito, the extreme heat is no reason for we should not use the extreme heat for a reason for our workers to earn more. No, the extreme heat is a reason for our workers to have a respite or a rest from the extreme heat. Yun po yun. Para po sa kalusugan yun. So that they can work the following day. There will be no accidents. There will be no heat stroke. There will be no collapsing due to the extreme heat.
Okay, we'll have more to talk about. But first, we have to take a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Mai Rodriguez. Our source today, Senate Minority Leader Koko Pimentel. Senator, President Bongbong Marcos is now in Washington to hold a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden. Now, the president said this will further strengthen Philippine-U.S. relations. So what priority areas should the two leaders, do you think, should focus on?
Well, I think we should change now the emphasis of the Philippines-U.S. relations. Let's focus more on the economic relationship. Let's convince the United States to not only offer to buy more Philippine products, but to actually buy more Philippine-made products. Because right now, when there is an announcement about United States assistance or a program or a project in the Philippines or concerning the Philippines, it is in all likelihood concerned about military, security matters. So I think it's about time that we shift our focus to economic cooperation between the Philippines and the United States. The United States is still the number one or the biggest economy in the world. So maraming pangangailangan po yung biggest economy in the world. So kung saan makasupply ang Pilipinas, I hope they will make a concession to also prioritize Philippine-grown or Philippine-made products to satisfy the U.S. market needs.
Okay, Senator, President Bongbong Marcos also said that he will discuss the Mutual Defense Treaty and the Visiting Forces Agreement. Do you see the need to update these agreements? And if so, on what particular provisions?
The EDCA, also the EDCA should be reviewed. They should not be. There should be more transparency. There should be more authority on the part of Philippine commanders or Philippine authorities to check what is stored in our Philippine bases, the use of the area we are allowing the United States military to use. Hindi po na, wag natin itrato na as if ano na para silang sovereign areas, restricted areas which we cannot check. Okay? On theory, the commander of the base is still a Philippine commander, but in reality, the Philippine commander of that base should be allowed to check how that area designated for the American military forces has been used, what have been stored there. Okay, in theory, on paper, there is a report, a general description of what will be stored. But in reality, the commander, the Filipino commander or Filipino authorities must be able to check. Yet to make sure that, since the EDCA is pursuant to a mutual defense treaty, I would like to stress the word defense. So logic tells us that Philippine territory, since we allowed it to be a storage area for American armaments and military supplies, Philippine territory should only be allowed to be used for defense purposes. For the defense, these are the armaments or the materials our treaty partner has decided to store in our territory to aid us Filipinos in the defense of our territory. So kulang po yun kasi as currently written, the EDCA provisions can be cited to decline the inspection, the ocular inspection, the in detail inspection of the Filipino commander or the Filipino authority. So i-improve natin in that way. And then of course, we can also improve it by emphasizing, aside from defense or to go hand in hand with defense, would be disaster preparedness. So yung mga expected natin na mga goods to be or items to be stored there would be in relation to relief operations after a natural calamity or a disaster strikes the Philippines.
Yes. Senator, I only have time for one last question. I'd like to get your reaction on the latest West Philippine Sea incident wherein a Chinese Coast Guard ship nearly collided with the Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Malapascua
Correct.
in Ayungin Shoal.
Correct. This is very unfortunate, and this should really be an eye-opener and should alarm all of us, because we should avoid a repeat of this incident, because who knows, in the future baka may actual collision na talagang mas malala na po yan. So that's why I think this code of conduct which has been mentioned for decades already must be seriously and in good faith pursued by all of the claimants and all of the countries using the West Philippine Sea and the South China Sea. Otherwise, we fear a worse event, where there is not only a near collision but an actual collision. Yun na po yung masama, because if there is now an actual collision, we remember we use different kinds of vessels in the West Philippine Sea and in the South China Sea. So I urge the parties to, in good faith and in haste, already negotiate this code of conduct. Start the dialogue, and then kahit na ano lang muna, let's be happy with the small victories. Basta magkaroon po tayo ng agreement, and the purpose of the agreement is actually to avoid a repeat of incidents like this, which can lead to so-called misencounters, which would really gravely escalate the reactions of the parties involved.
Right. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Senate Minority Leader Koko Pimentel. We will be taking a short break. When we return, we'll talk about the near collision of Philippine and Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Stay tuned.